Namaste. So in the last few verses, actually the 6 verses, beginning with 11 through 16, we have gone over the process of Ātma vichara. And just to sum up briefly, Ātma vichara means looking into what is the self. Who am I? What am I? How is this world created? And so on. All these great questions can be answered by intuitive knowledge. And the answer to all of them is one and the same, Brahman. So, if we perform the process of Ātma vichara properly, with great intention and intensity, then we will definitely come to this same conclusion. But then the point is, how do we realize it? Well, to do that, we have to remove the ignorance that keeps us from realizing it. You're going to ask me, how do we remove the ignorance? Well, first of all, what is ignorance? Shankaracharya, in his introduction or preamble to his commentary on Vedanta Sutra, talks about superimposition. And we can see in the next few verses, subject of this video, some really good examples of this superimposition and how it creates ignorance. And then we can discuss how to get rid of it. Ātman is verily one and without parts, whereas the body consists of many parts. Yet people confound these two as one. What else can be called ignorance but this? Ātman is the ruler of the body and is internal. The body is the ruled and is external. And yet, people confound these two as one. What else can be called ignorance but this? Ātman is all consciousness and holy. The body is all flesh and impure. And yet, people confound these two as one. What else could be called ignorance but this? Ātman is the supreme illuminator and purity itself. The body is said to be of the nature of darkness. And yet, people confound these two as one. What else could be called ignorance but this? Ātman is eternal, since it is existence itself. The body is transient, as it is non-existent in essence. And yet, people confound these two as one. What else can be called ignorance but this? Or to put it in today's vernacular, like duh. Yet, we see in everyday life people talking about the body as if it's themselves. Or the possessions of the body. Oh, I lost my glasses. This is my house, my car, my name even. So under this category of I and mine, instead of people saying, I am the self, I am Ātman, they identify with the body. This identification and other psychological processes that are similar to it, such as projection, objectification, identification, mistaking one thing for another, is generally called ignorance. But Shankara identifies the mechanism common to all of them, and he calls it superimposition. So what is superimposition? Superimposition means taking the identity or attributes of two things that are completely different and, as the verses say, confounding them, mistaking one for the other. And of course, the perennial example is the rope and the snake. How many times have we heard this? One goes out in maybe the twilight, semi-darkness, and sees a rope coiled up and mistakes it for a snake and feels real fear as a result. But then when the cause is investigated, it's found to be nothing but a rope. What happened? Well, there is a vague similarity between the form of a rope and a snake, especially if the rope is kind of coiled up. And so one has a memory or an association of the form of a snake with the feeling of danger and fear. And so, seeing the form of the rope, one remembers the snake and then feels fear on that account by association. This is a perfect example of superimposition. There is no snake. The snake doesn't exist, but as far as our psychology, it does exist because we identify the rope and the snake and we feel real fear. We run away, start yelling, "Hey, there's a snake." And people come with a light and say, "Oh, duh, it's just a rope." So the same thing is going on here with the self, with a capital S, Ātman, or Brahman, and the body. The body includes the mind. So the body and mind are mistaken for the self. You see, we have a latent memory of the self. Whenever we use the term I, it's really based on Ātman. But because we project, another form of superimposition, we project this thought of I onto the body, then we start to view the body as I and use the word I with reference to the body. And yet, as Shankara points out in his introduction or preamble to Vedanta Sutra, these two things could not be more different. And as these verses that we just went over indicate, they're opposite in so many ways. So how is it possible that we could mistake one for the other? Well, how is it possible to mistake the rope for a snake? Through ignorance. Through calling up memories and associations that have nothing to do with the present object and identifying the two, projecting one upon the other. This is superimposition, adhyaya. So, being a form of ignorance, it leads to a mistake. In this case, mistaken identity of the body with the self. And then, oh, that's not all. The society around us and the nature of the world itself reinforces that identity. Even though the two things have nothing in common. The body is the scene, the drishya, and Ātma, or Brahman, is the seer, the drik. They're completely opposite. The self is self-illuminated, shining. And the body is full of darkness. Yet, people identify the two. How is it possible? In other words, the first thing my Adi Guru taught us is, you are not the body. You are not this body because this body has so many attributes that are contrary to spirit. It is temporary. It's full of suffering. And it's not the self. And the proof of that is that when we go to sleep at night, the body disappears. We go into a dream and we have a different body. A different world that runs by different rules. And then we go into deep sleep and that also disappears. So where did they go? Well, where does a fire go when it goes out? It simply ceases to exist because the conditions that created it, the causes, are no more. This is accepted in Buddha's teaching as the root principle of paticca samuppada, which we've discussed quite a bit on this channel. And this is also recognized in Vedic tradition as the principle of causation. When the cause is present, then the effect is there. And the effect seems to have all the qualities of the cause. But as soon as the cause is removed, the effect vanishes. Or as soon as the effect is removed, the cause ceases to be a cause. So we have this relationship between Ātman and the body. That Ātman, or Brahman, is certainly the cause of the body. Well, the cause of everything, really. But when it becomes manifest as a body, then all of its qualities are negated. Instead of being effulgent, it's dark. Instead of being full of knowledge, it's full of ignorance, and so on. Yet, because of this projection, this superimposition, we identify the two and think that the body is the self and call it I. As the verse says, what more than this could be ignorance? This is the root of all ignorance. Ah. So now we come to the practical application. How do we get rid of this ignorance? Well, first of all, we have to have knowledge. Knowledge is like a light that illuminates the actual situation. When we have knowledge, when we hear from a liberated soul, either directly or through scriptures or other descriptions, then we get the knowledge. The body is not the self. Then when we investigate with Atma Vichara, we can come to realize this. And exactly how this is done is that one has to observe the process in action. In other words, go deep into the mind as the seer, as Brahman, and illuminate this process of identification, of projection, of superimposition, because it started at some point. We started it. So we should be able to observe it, and we should be able to end it as well. And this is the process of jnana, that leads to full self-realization. Aum Tat Sat. Aum Shakti Aum.